what I'm going to do today is I'm going to introduce perspectival neutral monism, which is a strand of neutral monism that I defend and develop. And we're going to see how perspectival neutral monism can support the understanding or can give the experiencers tools to understand, to work with a certain set of psychedelic experiences, which are experiences, those experiences that I call of unity with the cosmos. Now, how are we going to do that? I'm going to first give you an outline of what experiences of unity with the cosmos are, or what I mean by this with this terminology. I am then going to give a very brief outline of what perspectival neutral monism is. And then in the end, in the last bit of the presentation, I'm going to bring the two things together and sort of show how perspectival neutral monism can support the understanding or integration of these experiences. And spoiler, the idea is that they sort of map onto each other. So the experience that we have during a unity with the cosmos trip can map onto the ontology or the metaphysical framework that perspectival neutral monism gives us. Right. So union with the cosmos. What do you think experiences of unity with the cosmos are? It's pretty obvious, and I'm pretty sure most of you here have either had one or have had a friend that has had it. And it's really hard to talk about experiences of unity with the cosmos for a series of reasons that we're going to see in a moment. For example, they're ineffable. They take us to a space that is totally different to the space we inhabit every day. However, I'm going to try to do my best to give some of the features or some of the sort of key ways that these experiences can occur. So we have different forms, and one of the most common forms is the experience of being interconnected. We experience unity in terms of interconnectedness. Myself and all the other entities in the world are really just interconnected, a bit like a fungal network. Other types of unity experiences can be had in terms of non-duality. So in terms of the abolition of the distinction between self and other, between subject and object. Other ways to have experiences of union with the cosmos are those experiences that we sometimes talk about in terms of, wow, the cosmos and everything in the cosmos is alive. The cosmos is conscious. So in this sense, unity is experience in terms of my being all one or unified or reflected in all the other entities and that occupy the cosmos, that live in the cosmos, that exist in the cosmos and the cosmos itself. And the last one that I want to mention is the experience of flow. So sometimes when we have experiences of unity with the cosmos, we experience like we're part of a flow, or like a flow of energy, for example, or we recognize that the first principle of reality is this like, wow, flow of energy, this flow. So we're unified all in this flow. Now, obviously, these are just sort of narratives that we can give about these experiences, because the key characteristic of this experience, as I said a minute ago, is that they bring us into a unified space where there is unity between myself and others, but most importantly, they are ineffable and transcendent. So while we're having these experiences, the experience that we have is really, really hard to report, because it somehow brings us beyond our conception of the self and reality. Those conception and those perception of myself and reality are dismantled, are disintegrated, are completely deconstructed when we have experiences of unity with the cosmos. And we're thrust into this new metaphysical space that is ripe of possibilities, that it's larger than what we grasp in the everyday, that is a space where a new conception of the self and reality can emerge. But the ineffability and the unity are also accompanied by, this is really hard word for an Italian to say, or they come with a sense of deep knowing. A sense of deep knowing characterizes these experiences of unity with the cosmos. What is the sense of deep knowing is a sense of knowing that this is how things really are. that's how things are. That space beyond our everyday is somehow true. And that experience of unity that I'm having comes out or feels true. It's not something that we think about. It's not a realization that we get to by means of deduction, that we get to by means of thinking, by using our intellectual capacities, but it's an embodied realization. It comes as an experience, it characterizes that experience, and it's an embodied realization. It's a realization that I have on my skin, in my belly, that I feel. And this sense of deep knowing, in the way that I understand it, comes with the deep knowing, or really coming into contact with the essence of being, with the essence of what we are. That space beyond what we see in the everyday is the essence of being. That presence, that pure being that we experience in union with the cosmos journeys, brings us closer to the essence of being, to what we are. And this is an embodied realization, okay? So experiences of unity with the cosmos, we can talk about them in different forms, but they all have some stuff in common. They are experiences of unity between myself and everything else. They are ineffable and transcendent. They take us, or thrust us more often, beyond our conception of self and reality and into a new metaphysical space. And they are characterized by a sense of deep knowing, a sense of truth, a sense that that is the essence of being. And this deep knowing is an embodied realization. Now, neutral monism. Let's start with the more complicated philosophical part. Right, so neutral monism is a strand of monism. So in metaphysics of consciousness, we generally work across two camps. We have on one hand, the dualist camp. So the dualist tells us that everything in the world is made out of two distinct substances. The mental substance, the stuff of our thoughts, the stuff of our emotions, the stuff of our experience, that immaterial stuff. And then the other substance, which is the material substance. The stuff that science captures in a certain sense, the stuff of material objects, the stuff that makes up this reality that we share. Now, on the other hand, we have the monist camp. In the monist camp, what does the monist tell us? The monists tell us that everything in the world is made out of the same kind of stuff. Everything in the world is made out of one kind of substance. And traditionally, within metaphysics of consciousness, we can construe monism either in mental or in material terms. So for those that were here before, the talk that Chris gave and a bit of the talk that Susan gave were all instances or discussion more based around the material or materialist camp. So the material monist tells us that everything in the world is made out of one substance, and this substance is material, is physical. So that's the stuff of physics in very short. Forgive me for how shortly I have to define physicalism, but okay. All right. So obviously, as we saw in Susan's talk, the problem for the materialist is explaining how the felt aspect of our experience can come out, can arise, or can be explained in terms of a type of stuff, the material stuff, that wholly lacks that sort of nature. How can this deep felt aspect of my existence come from a combination of physical ultimates? That's the problem for the material monist. The mental monist, on the other hand, goes the other way and tells us that everything in the world is made out of mental stuff, that everything in the world is made out of the stuff of thoughts, the stuff of feelings, of emotion, of our phenomenology. And the material monist, the mental monist, has the same problem that the material monist has, but converse. The mental monist struggles to explain how the material stuff, the objective world, the object that we find in the objective perspective, can arise from this mental stuff. So this is the sort of landscape within which neutral monism very quietly makes an entrance. Or, well, back in the day it was kind of quiet. Now we're louder, right? So neutral monism sort of takes into account the issues that other types of monism have, and tries to find a middle way. They're like, okay, so if we posit one hand of the Cartesian distinction or the other, we're still going to have some issues. So what can we do? Let's try to find a middle way. So the neutral monist, how does the neutral monist find that middle way? The neutral monist generally posits that the stuff of the world is all of one kind, and this kind is neutral. And by neutrality here, again, very briefly, we're going to, the neutral stuff is generally sort of defined in terms of it being neither mental nor material. Obviously, there are a lot of ways to construe this, but let's just take this via negativa definition of the neutral stuff. For the neutral monist attempts to find a middle way between traditional forms of monism and posits that the stuff of the world is all of one kind, and this kind is neutral. Now, in perspectival neutral monism, we like to substantiate that negative definition. So I love the attempt, the creative attempt, the attempt that the standard neutral monist does in going beyond, or in trying to find an alternative way to explain our existence as experiencers in the world than traditional monists. But I feel there is some more work that could be done. And so instead of leaving the definition of neutrality as neither mental nor material, I like to define the stuff. So I go a little bit back and I look into Spinoza, and I go the Spinozian way, let's say, to define the stuff of the world as an infinite, all-encompassing substance that is neither mental nor material. So we still have the neither mental nor material thing. We're still trying to think beyond the conceptual framework that the material monist and the mental monist give us, but we're adding something else. We're sort of broadening this landscape and substantiating this landscape with the idea that this stuff that is neither mental nor material is, in effect, an infinite, all-encompassing substance, okay? So the idea of what an infinite and all-encompassing substance is, in my opinion, quite difficult to grasp, is ineffable in a certain sense. So the best way that I have to describe this neutral stuff is as follows. The neutral stuff, this infinite, all-encompassing substance, is such that only from the perspective of the eternal, or only the eternal, could wholly capture or wholly appreciate the magnitude of this stuff. Only the eternal can only appreciate this all-encompassing infinite substance in its entirety. Us, on the other side, can only partially appreciate, can only partially grasp this substance. The magnitude of the infinite, all-encompassing stuff is only partially available to us. Okay, and we're gonna find out why in a minute. So I didn't know whether I wanted to do this or not, but I think I'm gonna do it because why not? So what I wanna do is I want you all to close your eyes. And while you close your eyes, I'm going to tell you that for me, philosophy is a creative endeavor. It's an endeavor of pushing the boundaries of what we know. And it's also an embodied work. And this will come clearer as we keep going. But what I want you to do now, in order for you to keep following what I'm doing, is take a few deep breaths. So we just start by taking one, and trying to relax into the chair, and another breath. Keep relaxing in the chair, and as you relax, become conscious, become aware of your body, of your skin. And on an exhale, really empty out your lungs. And imagine going down a ladder. Go down one step, another step. Keep going down as you breathe. Down, 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 until you find a door. Open that door. very slowly open the door. That's the door that divides your present perception, present concepts from the infinite, all-encompassing substance. Keep breathing, keep feeling what's happening in your body. And once you open the door, imagine what it is like to enter reality beyond your everyday conception of yourself, your everyday conception of reality. Go into that. Go over the door and keep exploring, keep feeling what it would be like to swim, to touch, to feel this infinite, all-encompassing substance. What does it look like? Does it look like anything? What does it feel like? Cold, hot? Does it feel like anything? Can you hear sounds? And keep breathing your way through your exploration of the infinite substance, the infinite stuff that lays beyond those narrow chinks of the everyday. And when you feel you're done exploring, then you can make your way back to the door. Slowly make your way back to the door, touching the knob, opening it if it's closed, setting your first foot on the ladder. Make sure you feel the ladder, the steps under your feet as you come back to a more concrete version of reality. And go up, 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 until you come back to this room and open your eyes. Okay. So, great. I surprise myself sometimes, often actually, but yeah, never mind. Okay, so why we did this exercise that I didn't plan before will become clearer as we move along in the presentation. And but let's go back to the presentation. So, perspectival neutral monism is a creative effort. It's a creative effort that starts with no prior philosophical assumption, and that really wants to create an alternative way through what metaphysics, what contemporary metaphysics of mind is. This part, the definition of the neutral stuff, is more traditional. The part that we enter now is totally non-traditional stuff, non-traditional work that I did. So whenever I talk about it, wow, that went fast. So whenever I talk about it, I always tell people to sort of like buckle their seatbelts and go. I want you to think about this in a more creative manner. So I'm gonna go really fast through this. So the idea, so we have the neutral, infinite, encompassing stuff, and now we have to understand who we are within, or how to identify ourselves, experiencers in the physical world. And very briefly, the idea is that we are neutral patterns. So located portions almost of this neutral stuff. And the general idea is that the mental or our experience or our existence as experiencers in the physical world is explained as follows. The idea is that neutral patterns narrow down the multidimensionality of the neutral stuff into a world of significance, which in this case is the physical world and my experience. So this is a bit of a mouthful. What do I mean? First of all, I did not develop this model. This is a model that I borrow from biology, and especially discussion on autopoiesis and the enactive model to cognition. Is based on the process of sense-making that we find in biology and the enactive approaches to cognition. So what we do is we take the main features of this model and reapply them to biology. The basic idea is that each organism, brings forth a world of significance based on their inner specification and on what they need for survivorship, very briefly. So what's the idea? The idea is that I'm cell A, and then cell B and cell C all exist in the same environment, and we all have nutrients or molecule X in front of us. So I'm cell A, and I can feed on molecule X, so I go closer to molecule X and I absorb it. Cell C, sorry, I'm going super fast, but because I want to get to the last point. Cell B will come closer to molecule X and will be like, oh my God, this is not good for my survivorship, and will move away. And cell C will be absolutely neutral towards the value of this molecule, whether like this molecule is neither detrimental nor beneficial for her survivorship. So it's sort of like just pass across it. So we have the same environment, but each organism affords that environment a different world of significance. In this sense, what we have is the co-emergence of the cell, of her internal specification, and of what they call an umwelt, which is precisely a world of significance. What the stuff that is out there means for me as an organism. Okay, let's leave that aside. Now, back to metaphysics. What we said earlier is that neutral patterns, so we take that model and we translate it into a neutral monist framework, okay? So this is no longer about how organisms exist in their environment, but this is about how entities, neutral entities in a neutral world, give rise to their existence, in our case, as experiencers in the world. So the idea is that we narrow down, we almost act as filter, we afford, based on our inner specification, by narrowing down, the multidimensionality, this infinite multitude is narrowed down, is collapsed into the world of significance, which in our case is our experience and is the physical world. And very briefly, the specific patterns that we are endowed with a duality of perspective. So I can occupy an outward-directed, objective perspective onto reality, which allows me to collapse reality into the physical world, into the world that I find through science. And on the other hand, I can occupy a subjective, inward-directed perspective. And when I do this, I encounter or I narrow down the neutral stuff into my experience. I want to, for the philosophers in the room especially, I want to specify that the perspective is developed in terms of it being neutral. And there is a lot that we can say about that later. So the idea is that we are limited beings, and our limitations that are manifested in our perspectives narrow down, collapse this infinite multitude into my experience and into the physical world. This brings us to a conception of beings as truly embodied self, whereby the pattern that we are is physical when investigated from the objective perspective, and the same pattern is experienced when grasped from an inward-directed subjective perspective. So usually when we talk about the embodied mind, we always talk about the fact that the mind is spread out, is coextensive with the body, and then we generally give this explanation in terms of the mind arising from the physical features of the body, for example. Here we have a slightly different understanding of the embodied mind, whereby the pattern, the self is an embodied mind, is an embodied self, because the pattern is the body when looked at from a certain perspective and is experience when looked at from a different perspective. Now, I wanted to put a lot of time into this slide, but we're going to go super fast. Now, integration. Why is perspectival neutral monism useful for integration? First of all, I want to say that for me, in the work that I do with my clients and with myself, the use of metaphysics, the use of philosophy is not to provide people with distinct metaphysical frameworks to buy into, because at the end of the day, we don't really know what metaphysical framework is the right metaphysical framework. Rather, the impact that metaphysics can have on an integration process is to give the experiencer the tools to work with, to conceive of, to relate to that experience conceptually. We want to create a continuity of concepts between the experience, between the peak experience and the everyday life. And this continuity of concept relies on the broadening of some concepts that we have. For example, I am a bound person and everything is separate. So the idea is watering down certain concepts that we have in the everyday so that we can create a continuity between the experience and the everyday, so that we can maximize the impact of the insights had during the experience. We want to maximize the impact of the insights we have in that experience. And we can only do this if we play with our concepts and if we play with our experience. So very briefly, I think that perspectival neutral monism is quite good for helping us integrate unity with the cosmos experiences. First of all, because it allows us to think creatively. It allows us to think beyond our everyday conception of self and reality. And also because the two experiences, the experience and the metaphysical framework sort of map onto each other. So obviously in unity experiences, we have unity. We're thrust into a new metaphysical space that is ripe of possibilities. And we go beyond our everyday conceptions and into an all-encompassing stuff. And this is the way that we define the neutral stuff in this way is parallel to the type of metaphysics that we find in unity experience. When we start conceiving of the stuff of the world as an all-encompassing neutral stuff, we can play with what that stuff is like. We can allow ourselves to experience more into our everyday of that experience because we're not bound by the fact that everything is necessarily physical or everything is necessarily mental. So we find a freedom, we find a wider space for thinking about that experience. If to this definition, you also add the idea that we're like unbound patterns, for example, the idea that we are unified really becomes easier to conceive of. So we're starting to just work with broadening our conceptual landscape. Moreover, the idea is that patterns, that patterns narrow down into everyday self and reality tells us that it is conceivable, this is the way that we're narrowing down the everyday, but it is conceivable that in different contexts, we would be narrowing down reality in different, maybe broader way, right? And finally, in perspectival neutral monism, we have embodiment and the value of embodied experience and that deep knowing. And when we work on integration by using perspectival neutral monism, we have this deep sense of knowing that the body produces, that the body gives us as a central aspect, as a starting point for how we can conceive of life. We're not depersonalized as we might be within a more physicalist framework, but we can bring our experience as a bearer of truth, as a bearer of, something that has value and that can valuably be worked with. So yeah, and then ineffability, but if you're curious, we can talk about it in the questions at the end. Thanks.